and the ICB board. Some apologies, which are Erica Morris, Andrew Lewis, Dennis Curtis, Trish Bennett, Paul Kingston. Declaration of interest. Got that already from Ruth, I think. Minutes of the previous meeting, I've got one amendment received to confirm Louise was here in November. Everybody happy for approval? Okay, thank you. Action log. Mostly actions have been recommended to close. We've got an error in log. Action 106, Fiona and Jill, the meeting risk P15 should be marked as completed. And Ruth has been in touch with Anthony Middleton regarding action 107 and distribution of weekly bulletins to non-execs, which is being resolved. Key issues Celia likes to raise, I think most have been covered this afternoon. I've got no chair's announcements, haven't been covered elsewhere. Questions from members of the public. So we did have a number of questions about the women's hospital issue, and we did send out a formal written response to those questions last night so that colleagues had a chance to see the detail. They're quite lengthy and complicated. So I'll move on to the other questions. I've got a question from PJ Stott. Sorry?
You haven't seen our response to the case for change. There's detailed answers in there to the document that was put out 15 months ago for the engagement, and none of those issues have been taken up. The ICB case for change has been repeated, and I'm just amazed that there's going to be room found in the Royal, which is full.
Well, we're just making a statement.
Staffing to get at, and where is staffing going to be for 30 beds?
Okay. Well, I'm sure some of this will be covered in the when we get to the item.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is there are further concerns to the responses, and there's 85,000 people, barring maybe one person who's changed their mind on the signatures, who are very keenly following this. Okay. So we want to make sure that our response to the case for change is listened to. And as I say, I'm amazed that there's going to be room found in the Royal. There's no mention of the maternity tariff and the whole maternity crisis in any of this discussion. The shortage of midwives, etc. nationally. All of those things don't seem to figure in those documents.
Thank you very much. If you've got any further questions, do send them in. And we did have a brief conversation earlier on about, I think one or two of your colleagues are sending me some material as we agreed, I think, during that informal conversation. Okay, so I'll move on to the other questions. I've got a question from PJ Stott. Does the board believe it's acceptable that the complaints team at hospitals and Cheshire and Merseyside do not fully investigate complaints, as they know the PHSO will refuse to investigate complaints if escalated unless someone has come to harm, therefore avoiding admitting to errors or making improvements to services, contrary to the Trust's constitution? Claire, I think you're responding.
Yeah, thank you. So firstly, thank you for the questions. NHS organisations, so providers and commissioning organisations, manage patient complaints in line with local policies and procedures, and they follow the requirements of the Local Authority Social Services and National Health Service Complaints Regulations 2009. Our complaints policy is available on our website, and according with the regulations 2009, there are a number of exceptions which may result in a complaint not being accepted for full investigation. So it could be a complaint that's been previously investigated under a previous complaint, or with no significant additional information, a complaint that's been raised directly with the service or organisation commissioned by the ICB, or a complaint that's been taken and investigated by the Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman. A full list of these exceptions are available as part of the ICB website. So outside of the list of exceptions, the ICB does make full effort to fully investigate complaints that fall within the scope of the statutory regulations to identify how we can improve and develop services that we commission.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to a question from Philip Thornton. I am the director of a not-for-profit organisation working to improve health and well-being in one of the most deprived areas of Halton. Since the formation of the ICBs, I feel that the methods of interacting and communicating with the board regarding policy and delivery has become far more remote than it was with the old CCG structure, which itself was pretty remote. Can you please explain how a very small project like ours can meet with or contact board members or other staff to discuss local and regional health issues? And then Philip goes on to give me an example of an issue, which I won't repeat here, but Claire, you're going to respond.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Thornton, for getting in touch and also for the important work that your organisation does across Halton. We do recognise the importance and the vital role that community projects play to improve health and well-being, but do apologise that you feel that the ICB has been a wee bit more distant since the transition from CCGs. Strengthening local relationships is key to a commitment for the ICB public engagement framework, and please feedback if you want to have a look at that. So engagement between the ICB and partners in Halton is ongoing, and you can work with local organisations as part of the Halton Partnership Board and the Halton Health and Wellbeing Board. These fora play an important role and an important route to shaping priorities across the area. In terms of mental health, access to mental health data, we've shared your report with colleagues and we've already sought advice from the business intelligence team, so hopefully we can provide some more information to you. And I guess linked to that, we're very happy, well, Anthony Leo, Place Director for Halton, is happy to meet with you personally and follow up in any more detail.
Thank you. So I've got a question from Paul Dolan. Under the periodic progress report on the data info programme and its links with previous updates on cyber security, could the board give a local assurance to the near 2.5 million NHS patients in its footprint area that it's ensuring from routine contract reviews, providers, incident alerts, and independent verification of any data breaches over that federated data platform operated by Palantir Analytica in some 10 Cheshire and Merseyside NHS trusts, as well as the ICB, including minimising the risks of patient data being leaked, anonymised, stored or inappropriately passed on for commercial or any illicit purpose. This follows recent concerns expressed by the Parliamentary Select Committee on Innovation and Technology about outsourcing such a significant data contract to one overseas company with insufficient assurance on its data handling and protection processes were sufficiently robust or verifiable. Fiona.
I was slightly concerned you were going to come to me for that one, Chair, because I haven't got the answer in front of me at the moment. Is that a different one to the one you sent me this morning, Matthew? Apologies.
Yes, but you do. But,
Is that the one? Shall I read it out?
If you
I'll
mind.
do it.
Thank you.
So the response, which should be coming from Fiona. Thank you for your questions in response. In response, Palantir is the technology provider contracted to deliver the core infrastructure of the Federated Data Platform, FDP. Their role is to build and maintain a secure cloud-based platform that enables NHS organisations to access and analyse data in a federated way, meaning data stays where it is but can be used collaboratively. Palantir does not control how the platform is used. NHS England and local NHS organisations retain full control over data access, use and governance. For Cheshire and Merseyside, this means the data stays within the information governance of Cheshire and Merseyside and is never outwardly shared. Each trust, the ICB, has an instant reporting system. Each trust on the ICB have an instant reporting system, and any IG breach is reported on that system. There are then processes locally to classify the breach in order of severity and report internally, and if a major one, to the board. If it passes the threshold of major, it will also be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, who will assess and take actions, including fines. For every trust, the DSPT toolkit compliance requires major breaches incidents to be reported within 72 hours. All serious incidents are transparently reported through public boards. Palantir cannot access patient identifiable data. The FTP is governed by strict data protection rules, including UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act 2018. All the IG documentation for FTP platform and products for trusts and ICB have been internally approved through their IG committees that include an SIRO SIRO, and Caldecott Guardian, who are executive board members. The FDP documents are nationally scrutinised and approved through NHSE IG specialists. For every trust or ICB, these documents are available on public websites and referenced in privacy notices for the public. NHS organisations decide who can access what data, for what purpose, and under what legal basis. Palantir's role is limited to providing the technical environment. They do not determine how data is used or accessed. In Cheshire and Merseyside, we have prepared information governance documentation to ensure that Palantir cannot access the patient identifiable data. It is identified only as a data processor in the technical environment on behalf of the NHS. If a breach occurred, then because the processor is Palantir and they are contracted by NHSE, then both will be alerted to the local processes as interested parties in the same way as if any supplier system was partly to or responsible for a breach. And then the last one I've got is from Greg Dobkin. For any NHS bodies within Cheshire and Merseyside, is information available on the immigration status of individual patients? Is it uploaded to the NHS spine? Can such information be accessed by the Federated Data Platform, FDP, either currently or as an option in the future? Is Message Exchange for Social Care and Health, MESH, used to upload such information to the NHS spine? Does the FDP have access to NHS communications via MESH, whether or not this information appears on the NHS spine? In response, immigration status is not something that's collected, stored in health records. Therefore, the answer to all questions is no. There are occasions where a hospital may securely contact the Home Office to ask about an individual's patient status to confirm whether their care charges are recoverable or not, but it's not a data item that is any part of routine NHS data sets or associated data flows. That concludes the questions we've had put in. So I'll move on then to the experience story called Sean's story. Please.
With the diagnosis of cancer, you never ever think you're going to hear that word. And obviously you blame yourself because it is your own fault. Worst thing I've ever had to say in my entire life was tell the girls I had cancer.
Any child envisions their parents being at the wedding and not having him there, it would have broken my heart.
If I hadn't have quit and not been at the wedding and the consequent parties, I don't think they would get over it if I wasn't there.
It's a habit and an addiction that is so difficult to get over and to move away from, and honestly I couldn't be prouder of him.
Quitting smoking, and it's afforded me the opportunity to walk my daughter down the aisle. It's that simple for me.
Just for boards and also those watching, that's part of our What Will You Miss campaign. Something the ICB is doing with our 9 local authority public health teams, improving people's respiratory health and preventing lung cancer, which is also on the agenda for later today, is incredibly important. And having met Sean and Holly and his family is really great gratitude to them for sharing that story, because we still have 215,000 smokers in Cheshire and Merseyside who will benefit from the services that our NHS Trust provides and our community services too. The campaign's been able to get significant reach, appeared on media outlets, going out to reports, lots of radio and press interviews, and it's already seen over 35,000 more hits to the website where people can go and get that support on Smoking Ends Here.
Any questions, comments? Thanks for that, Ian. Appreciate that, seeing that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Women's Hospital Service in Liverpool, options appraisal and next steps. So Fiona, who's starting? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So all of the slides that are on the screen are in the pack of papers that went out, so I will go through them quite quickly and assume that everybody's had a chance to read them. To start, the purpose of bringing this set of papers and discussion today is for the board to receive the outputs from the options appraisal process that's taken place over the last 18 months to 2 years. We're specifically not asking the board to make a decision or choose an option today. We are asking the board to agree next steps for the programme, which primarily, the details are in the paper, but primarily we're looking for the board to agree that we ask our providers, so Liverpool Women's Hospital and the Liverpool Hospitals Group, to produce a business case for option 2, recognising that regardless of whatever long-term options we might progress, this is the only viable option in the short to medium term. And to agree the proposal that we undertake some additional public engagement on the work that's been done to date. The board have seen the list of clinical risks that underpin the programme of work that we've been doing and underpin the options appraisal. And I think we've all seen them written down. I think James and I could probably recite them in our sleep now. We've seen them that often. And you can become a little bit word blind to them. So what I wanted to start off doing today was just try and illustrate what these risks actually mean in reality for our patients and for the staff that look after them. Risk 1 is about what happens at Crown Street, so in the Women's Hospital now. And I would point out that the vast majority of women receive excellent care at that facility, facilitated by the staff and their incredible ability to find new ways to mitigate the risks that they face on a daily basis. But despite the incredible work that the staff do, there have been maternal deaths over the last 2 to 3 years. A lady who had what was thought to be a fairly straightforward postnatal infection being cared for in Liverpool Women's Hospital, but had a very sudden and very rapid deterioration due to sepsis, and she required resuscitation that could not be provided at Crown Street and had to be rapidly transferred, but sadly died in intensive care at the Royal. Another lady who presented with abdominal pain, pregnant lady, to Liverpool Women's Hospital. And again, it was that very sudden, unexpected, rapid deterioration due to what turned out to be a surgical problem, not a pregnancy problem. And again, rapid transfer over to the Royal, but sadly she died. And the teams that look after these women, and there is a national requirement to do an investigation into maternal deaths, the conclusions of those investigations afterwards raised the issue of the isolated site likely being a contributing factor because of the lack of specialty input that had these women been on a co-located site, they would have had that specialty input earlier in their presentation. The second risk relates to what happens in our other hospitals in the city. Just in the last 2 months, 2 women have been taken into Aintree, pregnant women having seizures. And on both occasions, the teams from Liverpool Women's Hospital mobilised a flying squad to go and care for them, including neonatologists, so the whole team. Sadly, one of those ladies did die and her baby died, and the other had an emergency caesarean section at Aintree Hospital. So as clinicians, we accept that we may not be able to remove all risk for all of our patients, but the clinical body that has worked on this options appraisal are very strongly of the opinion that we can do better than this and that we should be doing better than this. So there are some slides on the process that we have gone through, and I'm not going to go into the detail on them. I would like to thank everyone who has worked on the options appraisal, though the programme board chaired by James, the programme team, the staff at the Royal, at Aintree, at the Women's, who have all worked incredibly hard on this. This is the 4th time that these people, so there are some people who have done this 4 times. And each time, the conclusion of the options appraisal has been the same, that the only way to address the risks is to co-locate with adult acute services. So 4 times we've done this, 4 times we've had the same answer. The teams who have done the work on this have specifically asked me to make the point to the board today that they really want the system to act this time and not to ask them to do it again. So the options that we have landed on at the end of this process, as with any options appraisal process for major service change, the business as usual do nothing option is in there, but is obviously not one that we're looking to progress. Option 2 is called the do minimum option, and we have recognised that this is the only viable option in the medium term. So this involves more patients being cared for at the Royal site. Just bear with me 1 second. I haven't got my glasses on. I can't read that slide. More patients being looked after at the Royal site. So we think that this would be in the region of about 30 pregnant women where we would plan for them to have their baby at the Royal site because of other complex medical conditions. Oh, thank you. This would mean that women couldn't choose to have a labour and a natural birth. It would have to be a surgical birth to facilitate that. And we would be looking at about 75 to 100 more high-risk gynecology patients being cared for at the Royal site. So we already do some complex gynae there. The other element of this option is increasing what is provided at the Crown Street site. So increasing the enhanced care that we can give. We know we can't provide level 3 intensive care at that site to the standards and specifications that level 3 requires, but we would be looking to do enhanced care. We would be looking to invest in senior clinical time, both at the Crown Street site, but also increasing what was available for the city. So properly resourcing that flying squad that I mentioned before, because currently that is done on an ad hoc basis. Increasing the outreach midwifery and some dedicated ambulance resource to speed up the transfers that would still have to take place. There then are 3 sub-options within option 6, which is the option to co-locate services onto the Royal site. 6A is to put all of those services into existing buildings on that site. We have done some very high-level work on this to look at the feasibility of it. It is theoretically possible, it is feasible that we could do this by moving out other services, by using the non-clinical space that is currently in the Royal Building. It is an extremely complex set of moves that would require decanting and actually would take a lot longer than actually building something new. So option B and option C are both involve building something new, either a small unit and doing a mixture of integration and co-location, thank you, or option C, where we build an entirely separate building to put all inpatient maternity, neonatology and gynecology into the new building. We've included the outcome of the options appraisal scoring from the second workshop. There were several workshops, and at each of the workshops where we did this, there was multidisciplinary clinical teams from both the Royal, from Aintree, from the Women's Hospital, and our lived experience panel members as well were involved in this process and the scoring. There's a little bit more information in there which you'll have read about the test to fit exercise that we did on the fully integrated model. So in conclusion, what the programme board have concluded that it is only co-location of inpatient gynecology and maternity services with other adult acute services that will resolve the risk for all of our patients, or the vast majority of our patients. All of the options that we have considered have significant financial consequences. Option 2 would improve the situation compared to what it is today. We think that it would be less than 1% of women who currently use those services who would benefit from that. So an additional 1% for that co-location, and that this is the only option. We have to do this in the short term. But if we do this, all of the risks that we outlined 1 to 5 will continue to remain, either in part or in full. Option 6, either A, B or C, would achieve co-location for the vast majority of our inpatient and emergency gynae and maternity services, along with neonatology. There would always be exceptions when we have 2 A&E departments in our city. However, co-locating on at least one site would allow us to do far better work with the ambulance service, for example, and create clinical pathways that made sure patients presented to the right place the first time. And if we do not move to option 6 eventually, we think that the serious inequality and health inequality risks for women and babies will remain, and they are detailed within the equality and quality impact assessments that are in the pack of papers today. Another message from the clinicians who have been involved in this work is that they absolutely understand that option 6 comes with a significant financial tag. However, going back to their point about don't ask them to tell you the answer again, it's really important to them that this answer is not taken off the table at this point in time purely for financial reasons. And I promised them that I would share that with you all today. Just on to engagement and governance and decision making. So because we are not at a point of a decision, there isn't actually a legal statutory requirement for the ICB to hold a public consultation or do engagement on this. However, we know that there's significant public interest in this. We know that tens of thousands of people have signed the petition. We know that the campaign groups are really keen to share their views on other options that they think might be viable, and because it feels like absolutely the right thing to do, we are recommending that we do a period of engagement. In the pack, there is a paper that details some of the pros and cons of the timing of that. Unfortunately, we have PARD in the spring, and normally we wouldn't throw some information out into the public domain and then say, and we'll talk to you about it in a few months' time. We would want to do that much more seamlessly. But we are absolutely committed to that additional engagement and would like the board to agree that we go ahead with that. So the next steps that we are asking the board to agree is that we ask our provider to produce the business case for option 2, agree the process and indicative timescales for the public engagement, and that we continue our conversation with NHS England regarding support for achieving safe and sustainable services in the longer term. And I think it's also really important that we consider what we do with these services with wider strategic plans that the board will be aware of with for other services across both Liverpool and Cheshire and Merseyside system. Thank you.
No, nothing at this point, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry. Press the red button. Questions, comments? Who would like to start? Oh. Ruth.
I'll go if nobody else is. First of all, thank you for the very detailed work that's led up to this, and to all those clinicians and who've spent hours trying to help us find a way forward to reduce the risks to women and their children in Merseyside. It seems that option 2 is a way of trying to ameliorate the risk to a very small number of people. Can you say a bit more about how confident you are that the sort of numbers you're talking about will make a sufficient dent on the level of harm that happens? You know, that threshold of 30 births and 100 gynecology cases seems quite small. And I just worry that we, even with moving forward a little bit, we're still left with quite a lot of risk and harm potential.
Yeah, happy to say a bit more on that, because it is a drop in the ocean of what needs to be done to properly mitigate the clinical risks. This time round, having done the options appraisal several times before, I'm much more confident that we understand our options better this time. The work that the clinicians have done has been really significant. We spent a lot of time risk stratifying the population and looking at, and our obstetricians in particular spent a lot of time trying to put into buckets, it's not quite the right word, is it? But group cohorts of patients that we could look at how we would manage them differently, from the top of the pyramid, the really small numbers of very high risk. And the problem that we have is that as we go down that pyramid, the amount of equipment, the space, the estates, the staffing resources that would be needed to do a bigger cohort at the Royal under option 2 just got to a point where it wasn't viable, because it was going to be so disruptive to other services or so expensive that it just we should be moving to option 6. We did the same for gynecology as well, and the numbers for gynecology are really significant as well.
Okay.
So the residual harm, you know, the impact on the level of potential risk is still quite small then from this option.
So option 2 is a very small improvement, very, very small improvement on what we've got at the moment for the most complex, and I think it said in there, so it's about 1% of the population that uses the services currently.
I think the key point here is, as Fiona stated in the presentation, is that the known stuff. So there is a small number, as indicated, of people where we know there is a very high risk and therefore we can plan for it. What it doesn't resolve is the unknown situation, which is obviously a much bigger pool. Some of the things that are in the descriptions on option 2, as Fiona stated, is, you know, the team at the Women's make a Herculean effort when something goes wrong at, say, Aintree or the Royal. If they're there, if they're not in theatre, if they're available to quickly get in a car and get over to somewhere, it seems to us, knowing that that's a situation we could face, there's things you can formalise and deal with those known expected events, but it still leaves a serious sort of consideration. I think the other point of this is it's not just all about the emergency risk, it's the inability to meet specifications on specialist services, that the longer that goes on, the more likely we are to lose them from the city, which is another big issue.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No. I mean, there seem to be two obviously related issues here. One is the option 2 question, and the other is the long-term, talking to NHSC and NHS Centre about the long-term support for looking at option 6. And that, clearly we need to press that as fast as and as fulsome in a way we can. So I don't think there's any argument around that table around that, and indeed with the trust either, I guess. That's the same position, I know. So the question fundamentally comes back to option 2, to move ahead on that. And I take the point, Fiona, we can't prevaricate any longer. I mean, this has been going on since the mid-2016, was it? So I think the proposal is we agree on the option 2, press on, look to the provider to come back with a business case and do that as fast as possible. And meantime, press hard with the region and the centre around the long-term capital availability for solving the bigger issue. That seems to be the 2 steps in it. Andrea?
So I think it's really important that the ICB finance leads get involved in that business case.
Yes.
We'll definitely need to understand the financial impact of the option that's being explored. So happy to get involved and support doing that piece of work.
I think that's a very fair point to make sure, James, that we are more integrated than perhaps we have been in recent months on some issues on this particular one, and as well as the wider business case and recovery plan. So we need to do that.
It was just to add alongside the, I suppose the programme, or the process behind following this programme. You also asked about the public engagement in the summer, and to ask for support for that, and just say I would absolutely support that. I think it's really, really important that the people of Liverpool are allowed to have a voice, and that people are actively engaged in this process. So I think that we've got clinicians involved, we've got strategists involved, we've got finance involved. We need our patients and our population involved as well. So I would also support that as well.
Indeed, well, indeed, add that into the equation, but just make the very clear point there is no stepping back from the long-term solving of this issue and the need to press the centre and the region for the resource availability on a big capital spend on this. That's the key point as well. So is everybody comfortable with that as an approach? And obviously bringing in the public consultation in the full, sorry.
Yeah, speaking on the consultation around option 2, absolutely needs to happen. And on behalf of the Health Watch, is happy to be involved in looking at any of the material that goes out to make sure it makes sense to the public as much as we can do. I know it's a very small proportion, but for people in that group, well, we already know that they're at very high risk. Doing what we can around those, as at least having the proposal that is properly thought through and able to be presented to the public about what we can do, because I would not want a family member to know that they were at a high risk and not have something put in place. I accept the point that it leaves a lot of the unknown high-risk cases that we haven't got a solution to at the moment, but it's absolutely right to take that to the public and to get people's thoughts on kind of what we do as this small but important for that group of people.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. So, option 2, press on 6, the capital resource availability, and also the public consultation, which needs to be in a fulsome way and engaging the whole public. So is that agreed? Yep. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, James. Thank you, Fiona, for that. So I'll move on to lung cancer screening, phase 5 procurement recommendations, there if we can, please. And I think we've got John Hayes here, CNM Cancer Alliance, please, to present for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My name's John Hayes. I'm the Managing Director of the Cheshire and Merseyside Cancer Alliance, and I'm here to talk to the paper that's in the pack around the lung cancer screening programme. Okay, so the purpose of the paper in the pack is to seek the board's approval for the commencement of the 5th phase of rollout of lung cancer screening across Cheshire and Merseyside. Phase 5 will bring the lung cancer screening programme to the populations of Cheshire East and Cheshire West, and that would complete the full Cheshire and Merseyside rollout of lung cancer screening. So just a little bit of background and context. Lung cancer screening actually was pioneered by clinicians in Liverpool and Manchester, and then was nationally adopted as a pilot through the National Cancer Programme. And through that national pilot, we have rolled out lung cancer screening to all but 2 ICB places. And we commenced with phase 1 and 2 in 2021, covering Liverpool, Halton and Knowsley, and then we have rolled out 2 further phases, and we're now on the precipice of starting phase 5, subject to board approval. The lung cancer screening programme started, as I mentioned, as a pilot. It used to be called the Targeted Lung Health Check programme. And then in June 2023, the National Cancer Screening Committee recommended that the Targeted Lung Health Check programme becomes a lung cancer screening programme and is now mandated under Section 7A of NHS Public Health Responsibilities. So it is now moving into being the 4th national cancer screening programme alongside bowel, breast and cervical. NHS England is committed to achieving full national rollout of lung cancer screening by March 2030 and has set an interim target of being at least 50% rollout by this coming March. In Cheshire and Merseyside, we've done very well. We're slightly ahead of that. We should be at 57% rollout. And if we get the go-ahead to commence mobilisation of phase 5, then we will hit the milestone of full population rollout by 2030. Just as a bit of further background, lung cancer screening is a targeted screening programme, so it is focusing on the population from 55 to 74 who are smokers or who have ever smoked, and it's a 2-year cycle of screening round. Okay. The programme itself involves inviting eligible population members to a lung cancer health check, and then higher risk patients are offered a low-dose CT scan. The funding is provided through NHS England. It is targeted funding, and that targeted funding has been confirmed through the current spending round. And really importantly, lung cancer screening is a major contributor to improved outcomes for patients in Cheshire and Merseyside, and has significantly improved our early diagnosis rates. So just putting some of those in figures, for the rollout to date, we have invited nearly 200,000 eligible members of our population for lung cancer screening. We have undertaken just short of 100,000 lung health checks, delivered over 50,000 low-dose CT scans, and through that to date we have found 714 lung cancers. Now, the vast majority of those lung cancers were found whilst the patient had no symptoms whatsoever, and that means that 80.4% of those have been diagnosed at early stage, giving them a much, much higher chance of easier treatment and a cure. Indeed, 80% of those 714 patients have been treated with the intention of fully curing their disease. We have also found, as well as the 714 lung cancers, we have found a further 46 other cancers through that programme by doing a low-dose CT scan. There's also a really important prevention aspect to the programme. So to date, just short of 8,000 referrals into smoking cessation have been made through people coming into the lung cancer screening programme and being offered a smoking cessation programme. And we have seen just over a 48% quit rate at 4 weeks. If we were to use those outcomes and mirror those to the populations of Cheshire East and Cheshire West, we would expect from phase 5 to find another 500 lung cancers in that first 2-year phase, and obviously there'll be future cancers that we detect in future round lengths. We would expect that, again, 80% of those, so 400 of those, would be early stage lung cancers, and the majority of those would be offered curative treatment. And we would probably make another 4,500 referrals into smoking cessation programs. Lung cancer screening has been a major factor in really moving the dial on early diagnosis. If we look at lung cancer in particular, that has moved from 32% of our population being diagnosed with early stage cancers to currently 43%. Sorry, I've got those figures the wrong way around, from 33 to 42%, so that's a 9 percentage point increase. And actually, for every 120 patients that we diagnose at an early stage as opposed to a later stage, that translates to a whole percentage point improvement across the whole of our early diagnosis rates for all cancers. So it is really, really significant. The ask of the board, and this paper has gone through ICB execs and has been through the ICB Finance Investment and Resources Committee and has been approved or recommended by those groups for approval here today. The recommendation is to approve the commencement of phase 5, delivered through a permitted modification to the existing contract with Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital, which is the provider of phases 1 to 4 of the lung cancer screening programme in Cheshire and Merseyside. Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital's total contract is just short of 180 million. The cost of lung cancer screening phase 5 will be 12.7 million over 2 years, and therefore that's under the 25% bar for the provider selection regime. Liverpool Heart and Chest provide an end-to-end service for lung cancer screening, including the MDT model, and that's really key to our specification, and therefore we would like to recommend delivering this through a contract modification with Liverpool Heart and Chest. And I'll leave it there. I'm happy to take questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Claire and then Janelle.
Thank you, John. Sat through the presentation at execs and at FERC, and it's compelling each time, so very happy to support it. I think there was a question about sort of additional 2 years funding and what happens at the end of that, but I think FERC's conversation, I'm looking at Sue here, in terms of we don't know what we don't know, but it's the right thing to do and absolutely fits with our strategic plan around respiratory services, etc., etc. I know the collaborative talked about lung health earlier, so very happy to support it.
Okay, Janelle.
Yeah, sorry. Absolutely agree that we should be rolling out to sort of phase 5. My question would be around the financial scrutiny around the actual cost of that additional rollout and being clear that we're clear about the bottom-up costs as well as the expectations from the service based on the current financial position.
Ian and Sue.
Thank you. Just to echo the importance of the programme and being able to establish that across Cheshire and Merseyside is vital. There is a risk within 4.3 that we've alluded to, and that's based on the work with Liverpool Heart and Chest on our CVD prevention service, that 10% of patients going through that have been identified as having coronary artery calcification. And so by increasing the reach of the programme, which is vital, it may have a knock-on impact on the demand elsewhere in the services. So I just been asked to work with our financial colleagues about how we may address that if it is a risk.
Sue?
Just to confirm that it did come to Finance Committee and we were happy to approve it. The conversation, it emerged that we were pretty confident of funding up to 2030 actually, and beyond then who knows with any sort of funding really. The point was raised around the impact on providers of a bit more pressure probably on the surgical cancer lists, but that overall economically it should be a saving in the longer term as more patients are treated earlier. So we were very happy to approve that.
Thank you. Adam?
I've withdrawn mine, it's been raised.
Okay. Sarah, Health Watch.
Yeah, knowing people in Liverpool have had their lung cancer spotted early and have survived, I'm a really keen supporter of this programme. And also speaking on behalf of the Health Watches in Cheshire today, I just want to confirm that their enthusiasm for this being extended to their areas so that the people in their areas get the chance of an early diagnosis too. It seems the right and fair thing to do.
Thank you. Anybody else? Can I just raise 2 points? One is the 88,000 referrals. Is that right? Is that the figure roughly in the early slide? You got 88,000 through the scheme.
We've invited just short of 200,000 people to date.
Just can you go back to?
Yep, of course.
Sorry, being a pain here.
Was it that slide?
Yeah. So we invited 200,000. How does that profile fit? That number fit with the profile of who we'd expect to invite? Is presumably focused.
So that 200,000 is the entirety of the eligible population in the areas covered by phase 1 to 4, as identified through GP lists. Obviously, people age in and age out of that, so every 2-year cycle, the population will slightly.
So we've got under 50% response coming back, taking up the invitation.
We have that uptake is increasing, and I would expect it to continue to increase as people get more familiar with lung cancer screening, because certainly, obviously, in Cheshire East and Cheshire West, there is lower levels of familiarity, and it would need to get that full population coverage, and therefore we can really promote it at full coverage level.
And you see the rest of it. The thing that really surprised me was the low number of referrals to smoking cessation and then the low number of conversions.
Well, we also need to remember that the eligibility for the screening programme covers those who have ever smoked. So it's not true that all of the people through the screening programme will be current smokers. And my public health colleagues were quite impressed with those numbers, actually.
It's those range, the quick range is within and actually above what you would expect in a specialised smoking service. The 4-week quit performance figures are usually the measure, and 48% at 4 weeks is within what you'd expect to see and quite good.
Right. It just feels intuitively low, that's all.
I would say this is when we saw the original patient story, it's how it's highly connected as well, and all part of our making a smoke-free society as well, and the impacts it have.
I just wonder whether that's worth another look at actually the business process around that, because it just feels so low by comparison with the
It's a brilliant, you can see why I'm advocating it for, because it's another route into the community stop smoking services.
Yeah. No, I'm just intrigued by that. If we were looking at that through a different pathway, you might be quite troubled by that. I'm just suggesting it, challenge. We're not scaring people enough.
I think hopefully you see more of our "We Will Miss What You'll Miss Out" campaign at the beginning, which was quite powerful. You can see, and we've done
I'm just intrigued by it. Just if you were in advertising, you'd think that would be that's not great as a conversion rate.
One and two quitters quitting is that's where we want to be, and if you're 3 times more likely to quit for good if you get the support in place.
It's just challenge. I'm just putting in this challenge. Because we concentrate on the scanning, but it's actually that next bit. Okay, any other questions? No thoughts? Great, well, I'm sure we agree the recommendation. You agree? Yeah? Yes. Thank you, and thanks very much, John, for that. Great to see the work being done. Thank you, and pass on our thanks to colleagues. Okay, so we'll move on to the leadership reports. Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give you some brief updates on the executive team changes. Just like to formally acknowledge that the Executive Director of Finance and Contracting is now Andrea McGee. Executive Director of Health and Integrated Care Commission is Claire Watson. And pleased to also announce that our Executive Clinical Director is Dr. Fiona Lemons, and also take the opportunity to thank Professor Rowan Pritchard-Jones and Chris Douglas as our previous medical directors and nurse directors who've moved on to pastures new, and thank them for all the work that they did for the ICB and the region. I'd also like to welcome Jude Adams, who's joined us as an Interim Director of Strategy and Transformation as part of our turnaround plan, and Jude joins us as a secondment, and but has worked in the system in Cheshire and Merseyside previously. So it means that our team are now settling down into the new roles as we take on a new operating model and purpose going forward. Just to formally note, we've made some changes to the ICB constitution. In the appendix, you will see those changes are summarised, but the board is asked to formally ratify those changes and note the approval of the updated ICB constitution by NHS England.
Everybody agreed? Thank you.
Just to say, I'm sure everyone's aware that we are going through the process of voluntary redundancy, and that continues, and we'll be able to give you further updates on that in due course, but we're still in that process that has to conclude at the end of March. Just some good news here. Not that that wasn't good news, there's more good news. Just to say that we have confirmed that the ICB and UHLG have supported more palliative and end-of-life beds based at the Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital, and they opened in January. Very important for Liverpool's system. And then another important piece of work that's ongoing is the Neighbourhood Health Programme. And we have 2 pioneers in Cheshire and Merseyside, one in Sefton and the other in St Helens. And they both come with some funding. But we had a national visit, and just like to formally thank the teams, because it was a very positive visit. Lots of sharing of good practice, and I think that will help roll out the neighbourhood programme beyond those 2 pioneer sites. And in March we will come back here with a progress update on progress around the neighbourhood health programme. I think that's probably the main pieces. Just we should probably note here congratulations to 2 colleagues who've been named in the New Year's Honours list. Many of you will know ICB board member Trish Bennett, Chief Exec of Merseycare. She's been awarded for an MBE for her services to the NHS. And Dr Graham Allen, Volunteer Medical Director at Southport Macmillan Centre, has also been recognised in the award scheme. And I think that was all I was going to mention,
Thank you very
Chair.
much. Any questions, comments?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Liz. Just in terms of the item around health and care partnership update, I note that the ICB is taking the opportunity to redesign collaboration, both with Liverpool City Region and Cheshire and Warrington. And I wondered if this was a potential mechanism for leadership on the patch when we're looking at the regional health innovation zones and the work that we'll need to do to prep for that for this coming year. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great opportunity, and I'll let Claire, who's been working the hardest on this piece, to respond.
Thank you. So I think there's work to be done, but obviously we've got the two mayoral combined authorities, Liverpool City Region, well established, and Cheshire and Warrington will become a combined authority in May, with the mayoral election the May after. So myself, Ian and colleagues have been working closely with both sort of footprints over the past sort of 6-12 months really. I think it's an opportunity, the art of the possible really. Liz and I met with Liverpool City Region Chief Execs and the Chief Exec of the Combined Authority last week. And I think really is within our own scope to determine what we want from that joint committee. Legislation says that ICPs will be sort of defunct by next year, next April. But what we've decided is to put ours in abeyance for 12 months or for the short term while we work up alternative arrangements. There's a draft paper we've done with Liverpool City Region, which is just sort of very draft, but it'll come through to board probably in March. And I think it's about what committees and what fora Liverpool City Region want to put into that and what we want to do. But I think we can put whatever we want into it, and I think that's the opportunity as a joint committee, what we want to devolve, what we want to delegate. I think it fits really well with the direction of travel of mayoral authority. So I think it's a really quite exciting, positive development.
Thank you. It's really helpful. Could I suggest that we kind of align our efforts around this, because from the Health Innovation Network perspective, as the body commissioned to lead health innovation by OLS and NHS England, we're also working with some of the same partners. This is a great opportunity to be on the same page.
It's an opportunity to streamline, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
So I think take that on board. So yeah, look forward to that. Thanks.
Agreed.
We did agree, I think we would have a presentation discussion about this at a board meeting here at some point. So maybe we could do that next time. Actually, if you can link up, that would be really helpful.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Anything else? So Ruth first, yeah, and then Hilary.
A comment and a question. Just a comment to say well done to Ian and his colleague Julie Kelly, who came to the board in July to say we're going to have a real push on flu vaccinations, particularly among staff. And it's really pleasing to see there was quite an impact, although hasn't got to where we want it to be by any stretch of the imagination. My question on that one is, can we rerun it, learn from what we did, and make sure we have the same push this summer going into next winter? So that was the first one. The second one was on the palliative care beds. The press coverage that I've seen says that it's a temporary arrangement for 6 months. And this has come about, just as colleagues will know, from the closure of the Marie Curie beds in Woolton. So it'd just be helpful to know, is this the permanent solution? And what's the plan?
So I think at the moment it's a solution for the here and now, but you'll also see from our Commission strategy, and one of our priorities is to look at end-of-life care beds, palliative care beds across Cheshire and Merseyside, because I think it's an issue where there's a lot of variation and access is different, so we need to have a proper look at it as a system-wide approach. But they'll stay open whilst we need them, absolutely.
Just confirm the press coverage, which may be incorrect, for 6 months, but that's not the understanding.
Yeah,
It's
ongoing review, I think we'll have to do. Thank you.
Perhaps we can correct that through our comms people.
Yeah.
Hilary?
Still on the beds, Liz, how are we going to protect them for the purposes that they're intended for as commissioners, so they don't get used for other purposes, bearing in mind they're in the middle of a of a specialist hospital. And then the second question, I'll just finish when I'm standing. That's okay. The staff, how are we going to staff them given the specialist beds are we using? Where are we going to get the staff skilled in palliative care and end of life from?
So if I talk about the beds, then maybe Fiona could talk about how we're staffing them.
Great.
In terms of protecting, we've commissioned them as palliative care beds, so they can't be used for anything else, and that's what we've agreed with the provider.
Good, so we'll have assurance around that.
Yeah.
I think that's, thanks, Claire.
It's about staffing the beds, Fiona.
Staffing the Marie Curie beds?
Well,
The new beds. There's been a lot of work done with the new provider and collaboratively across with the other hospices and with Loft to make sure that's one of the reasons why there was a bit of a delay, was just making sure that we got our clinical staffing levels right and the clinical governance and all the pathway work done properly.
So we've got the staff to operate the beds that are skilled in palliative and end-of-life care. I think that was my question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lovely. Thanks.
Okay. Nobody else? Anybody comfortable? Okay. Right, so we'll move on then, if we can, to the finance report.
Oh, okay. Not the committee report, financial report.
Thank you, Chair. So just want to remind everybody, first of all, of the control total that the ICB signed up to at the start of the year, and the control total the provider organisations in our system signed up to. Because I think it's really helpful context when we look at where we are at the end of the third quarter of the financial year. So the provider signed up to a 228.6 million deficit plan, and the ICB signed up to a 50.4 million surplus plan, and therefore our control total collectively is 178.3 million deficit. And in order to get to a break even as a system, if we give confidence of delivering that 178.3 million deficit, we receive deficit support funding to the same value, and we achieve that quarterly. Unfortunately, based on the forecast positions that we've been presenting as a system, we've only actually achieved the first quarter's deficit support funding, and that's 44.5 million. And later on, when we come to look at the cash, you can see the impact that going off plan has in terms of that extra cost over income and the loss of that deficit support funding. So I'm just going to start with the ICB position. So at the end of month 9, we had a plan to deliver a 38 million surplus. So on our way to getting to a 50 million surplus, and we are 7 million off that with a 31 million surplus. And there are real risks around the prescribing, ADHD in the acute sector activity in particular. And what we're seeing within that is some of our efficiency plans, which were backloaded, and we've had some real challenges with those. So we've got a lot of risk at the moment, and presently the ICB is forecasting a £15 million surplus, not a £50 million surplus. Again, I'll come on to what we're doing about that and what that means for the ICB. The next slide is just highlighting the position collectively at the end of month 9, and I'm going to focus on the excluding deficit support funding because that can distort the figures. But essentially, as a system, we're pretty much slightly ahead of plan after the first 9 months. So collectively, we're 2.8 million better than we had planned to be. The challenge we have is that we've already consumed 218 million deficit, and our plan is to get back to 178 million deficit. So that's a conundrum. So we're on plan. So you think, well, that looks really great. Where are we headed? And this is what's driving the Northwest region to have real problems with allocating that deficit support funding to us. I think this is a really interesting graph, if you like graphs like I do. And what it's demonstrating here is what we have been forecasting since month 4 with regards to the ability to achieve the deficit plan. So the green line at the top shows between month 11 and month 12 a sudden improvement to get to our 178 million deficit. So we refer to that as the hockey stick. And, you know, we have to convince, provide assurance that we can get to there. When we actually get the forecast outturns from our providers and from the ICB, month on month, they have been improving, but not at the rate to convince us we'll get to 178 million. So the yellow line at the bottom at month 4, we were showing just slightly better than a £400 million deficit, which is a significant figure for this system and way off 178 million. We're currently at month 9, forecasting 335 million deficit, which is 156 million away from plan. And that is what is driving the fact that we're not getting that deficit support funding. Actually, if you look at the rate of change, if we carry on with that rate of improvement, we would end up 113 million off plan, so still significantly off plan. But there's a real challenge about our forecasting in this system, and that is something that we need to address. I'll just skip past the forecast risk range because I've talked about the forecasting, but we can see the whole load of variances when it comes to our forecasting. One of the things that's really important from a triangulation, but also a delivery of financial plan, is looking at our movement in our whole time equivalent. So how many people did we say we would need to operate services at the start of the year, forecast through to the end of the year, and how does that triangulate with a cost reduction? What we did see in month 9 was the beginnings of a reduction in whole time equivalent, but that could have just been linked to Christmas. So we'll wait and see if that green shoot continues into next month. But at the moment it's too soon to say whether that is a real sustainable improvement, but there has been an improvement in month 9 in WTEs. So moving on to cash. So being off plan, being in deficit, put significant strain on cash, as you would expect, and the loss of DSF. There's been requests of 259 million at the time of presenting, and 150 million of distress cash has been supported nationally. There's a further 36 million being considered for February. We haven't accessed 111 million pounds of DSF, so the significant impact of DSF is felt there. I would have had a better payment practice code slide on after this, but unfortunately we didn't get that information until after the pack went out. So just to let you know, our ability to pay our creditors is significantly challenging in our system. At the end of month 9, our lowest score on better payment practice codes was 44%. And our target is 95% of invoices should be paid within 30 days. So it's really challenged. And 10 out of our 16 providers are no longer compliant with a better payment practice code. With regards to next steps, all of the providers and the ICB is required to have their boards confirm their forecast outturn positions We are to notify NHS England next week on the 4th of February, and there's a whole process to go through in order to explain the reasons for not being able to achieve plan and the remedial actions being taken to improve. So any changes to forecast need to be submitted in the next week, and then we'll be managing to those positions for the remainder of this year. It's really important to be aiming to have an improved as possible underlying financial position going into next year, because this will affect financial performance going into 2026-7 and beyond. So that is a position. As at the end of month 9, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, comments? A long journey. No. Well, thanks very much, and thank colleagues for all the work they're putting in behind this. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll move on to Chair of ICB Finance Investment.
Thank you. So,
is it on?
Sorry. The report in the papers focuses on the meeting before last, and we spent most of that approving the initial submission of the plan, and most of that was about the financial elements of it. I suppose key issues are that we are no longer responsible for submitting the provider financial plan, so this was just the ICB plan. The ICB submitted a plan for break-even, and that included a 3% cash release and efficiency saving of 75 million, which, to be fair, the NHS Regional Finance Director has raised his eyebrows a little, and I think his feeling is maybe it should be higher. But Andrea listened to that, so we'll see. We went through the month 8 position, but I think the meeting that we had last week of this committee was much more useful in terms of discussing how we are going to perform better financially. We received the grip and control report from PwC, and Andrea confirmed that we've already put the recommendations in place together with the internal financial governance report that we recently received. And we received from PwC and from Jude information on resetting how we deal with our approach to cash releasing, efficiency savings, and reconfiguring our programme office so that is much more focused on delivery with a separate assurance arm, so that we can be assured that what we hear is happening is really happening. So they are probably the key issues from those meetings. I don't know whether Jude wants to say anything about the PMO.
Thanks. So I think this triangulates to some of those recommendations from PwC about how we think about how our PMO is supporting our senior responsible officers that are leading those efficiency schemes to deliver, and have an independent PMO that is assuring and giving the board the assurance about governance and delivery and how on track we are. And I think that separation of the two functions is really key. There's something about not marking our own homework here and having someone that kind of sits slightly as part of our corporate governance that gives that assurance up through the finance committee and up to the board. That's an independent assessment. So we're working with PwC colleagues to set that in train. A key feature looking forward, I think, into the next year will be around all of the efficiency schemes in terms of large-scale programmes, but also engaging our ICB staff in the small-scale things that every budget holder should think about in terms of looking after the pennies and not just the pounds. So we'll be working through that reset over the next couple of months, as well as trying to get this year's position over the line.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Everybody comfortable? Thanks very much indeed. Quality and Performance Committee.
Thank you very much. Just focusing on the alert in the paper. What the committee did in December and January, it looked at some very sensitive measures of how the system was performing under the increased pressure, normally termed winter pressures. We looked at bed occupancy, and there was concern in the committee that the acute sector occupancy was at 96%, 2% higher than planned. Ambulance response times had already begun to deteriorate. What we did hear about were the effective actions to prepare for the increased demand and to respond to the emerging pressures. We were going to revisit that in January to look at the impact of that. We looked at another measure, which was flu vaccination rates among healthcare workers and also generally in the public. Flu vaccination rates, as Ruth was pointing out, were of concern in a number of providers. There was an agreed 50% target which most trusts met, but a few fell short of it. But to put this into context, when we looked at the data, over the past 5 years, all trusts had exceeded 70%, some as high as 95%. So there's a considerable challenge there for us going forward to improve flu vaccination rates. As for the population, we had, as you would probably expect, high uptakes of older people and in care homes, but there was considerable place variation between, for example, Knowsley and Sefton, again, mirroring health inequalities. We're particularly concerned at the low levels of vaccination amongst 18 to 64 and pregnant women, but noting that these were improving. So again, this scene of improvements, but yet still falling short of where we like to be. When we revisited these in January, all the acute trusts had achieved the target of less than 92% bed occupancy by the 24th of December, which was where we needed to be. So there was the committee recognised the efforts that have been put in place to deliver that, and this was the key target. At the time, no trusts were experiencing sustained ambulance turnaround delays, which has been a regular feature over the last few years, so there's significant improvements there. Corridor care, which we've looked at in detail, and we'll come back to the board with more on this. The number of instances fell across the Christmas period, although A&E attendances had increased overall, so there's a balancing position there that despite A&E attendances increasing, corridor care was not, as we expected, to increase at a similar rate. We looked into some detail about what had happened in terms of corridor care, and there was a report provided on individual trusts and their efforts to manage corridor care better. I'll not go into the detail there, but the committee particularly commend the efforts to continue to focus on what we've termed the Red Lines toolkit. So all trusts are working hard to that. All trusts are to a larger degree compliant with that, but some are actually able to demonstrate significant improvements that ought to be shared across the system. Returning to vaccinations, the committee had a long discussion about vaccinations and came to the conclusion, with the help of the specialists who attended the committee, that the current fragmented approach to population vaccination with unclear pathways should be addressed. Simply, people do not know necessarily where to get it. When they go to the place they think they're going to get a vaccination from, it may not be there for them. So there's a fragmentation. And in the same vein, the variation across healthcare workers was also noted. Some trusts managed to do it, others really struggle. So there's a standardisation that we'd like to see going forward for next year. So that was a big conclusion on vaccinations.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? No? Thank you. It's a bit of a Tony show now. Here we go.
Yeah, I didn't really want to be in the limelight myself.
Audit committee, thank you.
Because the chair of the audit committee is unfortunately not able to attend, I won't go into the detail. The report's set out there, but it's particularly important that the board approves the changed terms and conditions of the audit committee, so I could ask for that approval.
Everybody agreed? Thank you very much. And then chair of the System Primary Care Committee, Tony.
Yes, chairing this while the chair was away in Australia, and I don't begrudge her for that.
Yes, you did.
I
did actually, yeah.
I did actually several times in the meeting. Yeah. Again, it's a very challenging meeting to chair because of the depth of detail that we have to get into. The key theme, I think, that came out of this was it was finance driven in the sense that there's significant overspends, using that term loosely, particularly around GP prescribing. What the committee spent a lot of time on, and will continue to do, is identify the reasons why, not just to say that it's an overspend and that. So one particular comment was, it shouldn't really be looked at as an overspend, but as being a response to higher demand or possibly inefficient responses to demand. So at future meetings we'll go into more detail, and the monitoring system is being developed for that. I don't propose to say any more there, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, I've just been advised I've missed the performance report. Very, very slack that was. So, Integrated Performance Report, Jude. Sorry, I thought you got away with it.
I know, I did think I got away with it,
Sorry
Chair. Thank you. I'll take the report as read. I just want to pick up a couple of those key access targets, really, for our populations. Just building on the theme of vaccinations and winter, I guess. The system, as I'll describe it, has held its own over the winter period, which is, I understand, comparatively to last year, where the Cheshire and Merseyside system declared a number of critical incidents across its accident and emergency units. Pleased to report that this year, to date, we have reported none. Prior to the Christmas period, we had a real focus across providers in getting the bed occupancy down below 90%, and providers did that, and I think that saw us through a really difficult period, that alongside the ambitions around the vaccination, albeit I would suggest we have to go further than we did, but met the challenge that we put in front of ourselves. And I think the vaccination rate is key when we look at some of the sickness absence rates that are reported here. Our staff, our capacity, we shouldn't forget that. It is not just about beds and theatres and outpatients. It is having the staff that's wrapped around that. In terms of planned care, I'll come back to urgent care in a minute, but in terms of planned care, not yet reported, but the system's performed really quite well, with just 48 patients waiting over 65 weeks at the end of December, so not the 0 that we would have liked to have seen, but given that we went into the period of Christmas and December with industrial action, it is an improved position. And the system is already engaged in a sprint that has been launched by NHS England and funded in order to drive those waiting lists down over plan by a further 1% for the longest waiters, and to bring the 52-week waiters down. So we're hoping to see the benefits of that over the next 12 weeks. We anticipate that there will be further funded NHS England sprints on the faster diagnosis standard, which will help us again as a system, and on urgent and emergency care, but yet to receive the details of what those will be, but we need to be ready for that with our plans. We perform comparatively well on cancer, particularly on 62 days. The faster diagnosis standard is where we need to place focus, and therefore if we can capitalise on any national monies on sprints, that would be good. And I think there's a real theme for us. Diagnostic standards we perform well on across Cheshire and Mersey, and there's something for me about how do we build on that strength in our diagnostic capability, and that I think talks to improvements in planned and urgent care, about how can we support that shift of demand into our communities by using diagnostic capability. That doesn't mean patients are going to a hospital in order to get a diagnostic test. So using the capacity in the community diagnostic centres to redesign our pathways, I think is a really great opportunity for us stepping into this year. If I touch on urgent and emergency care, then because I think we've heard from Tony about corridor care, and not something that, whatever the improvements are, I think the elimination of corridor care has got to be a collective ambition. That requires us, I think, to think about how we decompress our acute hospitals in terms of the demand that's going in. And that is demand that doesn't need to be seen in an accident and emergency unit, can be seen in our urgent treatment centres, We've got a number across the city that are non-compliant with the national specification, and I think we've got work to do, and we will do, and have already started to look at that, because if we can build on that compliance, we can really create that left shift. We've got work to do on our community beds. How do we get the greatest benefit out of that, both for patients to step up from our urgent response teams in communities and step out those patients that are clinically fit for discharge but still residing in our hospital beds, all help us to decompress our emergency departments. So we're really going to be focusing on some of those things over the next few months and try to get a real push on some significant changes in our system that will help our acute providers in order to manage that demand that's coming to the front door, which in part can be managed in other parts of our system. The last thing I just want to touch on is frailty. Frailty across the whole of the Cheshire and Merseyside system. I think we have an opportunity with a neighbourhood health model to really think about our over 65s, the risk stratification of those, and working with local authority and our directors of adult social care in particular to overlay on clinical frailty scores the wider determinants of health, and think about in a neighbourhood model how we can support the frail elderly in their own communities, in their own homes, and work with providers of care homes to do that really effectively. So that will be some improvement work that we'll be focusing on over the next 12 months across both health and care and all of our providers. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, comments? No? Ruth?
I was just going to say, Jude, you might want to just mention that you start to engage with the directors of social care on that last piece. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. So we had a really helpful meeting yesterday with all of the local authority directors of adult social care, really thinking about how we spend our money collectively, because some of the capacity in the system is funded by ourselves and some of it is funded by local authority. So how do we work together to get the right solutions, particularly around those community beds and that frail elderly? There was an overwhelming support for colleagues, and we've agreed that we'll work together on some of the urgent and emergency care plans, because their input into it is absolutely critical to our success, particularly how we're spending some of the funds around better care funding, and thinking how can we use that funding to best effect collectively and manage some of the markets that we both have a vested interest in. So that was a really positive meeting, and I think things that we can take forward together.
Okay, thank you. Ruth?
I just wanted to pick up on the back of the pressure on hospitals. It's a continuous concern at this board that the rate of healthcare acquired infection continues to be really problematic. We're not in a good position compared to colleagues around the country. There are two or three organisations, one in particular I think not far from here, where it's a real concern. The action that's listed is that the improvement plan at Luft continues to be a focus at quality contract discussions. I mean, this has been a feature all year, but the rate continues. And in the spirit of David's challenge, are we going to try different levers or different encouragement for change? I think we can't carry on with similar patterns through next year. So I'd encourage some thought as to what else we can do beyond encouragement to really try and push for, because this is adding to the pressure on the hospitals and causing real patient harm. So just an encouragement, and any other observations you might have, and Fiona in your new role. And just a final question. At the last meeting, there was reference to 12 neighbourhood indicators that had been developed by NHS England that would become part of monitoring progress on neighbourhoods. And I just wondered, are we going to start monitoring those from April? I don't even know what they are. I haven't seen them, but just a question on that. But perhaps does Fiona want to comment?
Which one are you commenting on?
I was going to do the healthcare acquired infection one. Shall I do that one first? So new portfolio, so that will come to me. And actually, in preparing our strategic plan, I already sat down with our quality team, and when we were identifying what are the things that we want to take a closer look at going forward, this is absolutely definitely on the list. So if you, I'm happy to come back with a plan. I'm thinking we have an opportunity to use our system quality group, which we've done a refresh on, and which I think is going to become much more effective as we go forward, and I think that might be a good place for us to take a system approach to it. I've also identified that we in the ICB need to strengthen our IPC, but again, I think that's infection prevention control function. But I think that's something that we have to do collectively as a system and share and take a shared learning approach to it.
Hilary?
Yeah, a challenge I raised at Quality Committee is that I'm always astounded that providers don't make the correlation of some of these numbers that we're presented with. So, for example, staff not being immunised, we've still got over 50% of the whole staff workforce circulating in our community that are not immunised, some of them asymptomatic. But what does that mean in terms of their sickness? What can they, how do they correlate that? What does it cost them in terms of days missing per year? And the same with infection prevention and control in terms of what has that meant every 6 months in terms of extended length of stay plus days lost in terms of bed capacity as well. How many beds have we had to close? I think my final comment, it's great around the lever of, the diagnostic and shifting to the left. I had an elderly relative who went for a diagnostic. She could have gone 10 minutes down the road to Warrington Hospital, but she received an appointment for 24 miles away, which would have made 3 bus journeys. So we still got to make sure, particularly for elderly patients, that those services remain local, so we don't have those unintended consequences of people not being able to keep their appointment. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a quick comment on corridor care and the Red Lines Toolkit. So 5 of the health watches have done or are doing visits into corridors and the other temporary escalation spaces using the Red Lines Toolkit. And we know that being in a corridor or temporary escalation space is not nice for anybody, and it's a horrendous experience for the staff that are delivering that care. But one of the early things so far is it feels that the Red Lines Toolkit is really helping the trust to really focus on the things that they need to do to make that as dignified as it can be in a grim situation. I mean, it's not even easy for us to hear the stories of the people on the corridors or to see people in that distress, but it does feel there's a focus, and there's already a couple of examples where things were spotted and mentioned to Aintree just a couple of weeks ago, and they've already come back to say what they've changed and what they've put into address. So we'll have more to report back on, but it's really, we don't want to be in a situation where the Red Lines Toolkit is needed at all, but I think it's really important that it's there. And yesterday at the System Quality Group, there's talk about reviewing it again to see what else needs to be changed. So just to give some assurance that some of the things that we're putting in place seem to be helping to mitigate some of the worst of people's experiences.
Okay, Claire first and Fiona.
Yes, so Ruth, coming back on your queries about the neighbourhood health indicators, I can't remember the top of my head, but they will align to initially the 6 core components that were in this current year's planning guidance. So modern general practice around access, about frailty, and so there are 6 core components, so some of the indicators will refer to that. We are working on it with BI, so and I'm hoping over time we'll be able to present it through the report Jude will lead and own. But what I suggest is if we're going to bring an update to March's board around neighbourhood health, that would be a good opportunity to do some of that update as well, because I think it's really important to see baseline and then progress. One of the issues we've had to date is 1 or 2 of our places are still to confirm absolute geographies for their neighbourhoods. So until we've got the neighbourhoods, fixed down, we can't start pulling the data out. But we'll have all that for March, if that's okay.
Okay, Fiona.
I just wanted to let the board know that I've had conversations with Louise Barry about the visits to A&Es that Health Watch have been doing and the Red Lines Toolkit, and we have asked them to come to the Urgent Care Board so that we can take that patient voice and the learning from that into our discussions there.
Okay, thanks.
I've made this point a few times before, Chair, but maybe this will be the first time you're hearing it. So general practice provides over 90% of NHS healthcare. Just to point out, so from in this report, general practice provided 1.3 million appointments in that month. That's 1 in 2 patients in Cheshire and Merseyside. And yet actually the vast majority of what I would argue that over 90% of this conversation today, or 90% of this meeting, has been around secondary healthcare. And I wonder whether if this left shift could actually prevent and help support a lot of the problems that we're seeing in secondary care. So things like frailty, things like preventative medicine would most certainly help with patient care and patient outcomes. So I wonder whether we could potentially look at maybe some more focus on general practice and primary care.
No, you're absolutely right. And I have been surprised, if I put it candidly, the limited levers we have, if you like, in that journey of engagement. Let me put it like that in a gentle way. So you're absolutely right, and given the agenda, and we all know it, 30% people rocking up the front door shouldn't be there. We talked about it over lunch. I wondered about, kick the ball back to you in a sense. It would be good to have, if we could convert one of these meetings, to half of it, into a seminar of some sort with general practice. And if you could orchestrate where you want to bring them in from around the Cheshire and Mersey. But it needs a bit of setting up, but I think it would be just good to explore and hear, direct about what the sort of barriers, because often the barriers here are quite prosaic rather than actually being major strategic ones. And so I'd value a conversation around this table with colleagues like that, because it seems to be it's a big gap. And if we are to make progress on the sort of things we've been talking about, I go back to levers of commissioning. Maybe we should look at levers of commissioning GPs on contract. Thinking differently about that.
I'd welcome that. I think that's a really good idea. In the Population Health Improvement Plan, which sits behind the sort of high-level strategy, there's an awful lot of work gone on in terms of developing sort of 5-year commissioning intentions for all 4 contractor groups. So it might be that we use that as an opportunity, particularly if we're bringing neighbourhood health here in March, use neighbourhood health and sort of the wider primary care conversation using that document, because that would be quite a good segue in.
So my question to primary care, GP land, would be, rather than trying to do a blunderbuss and hit everything at one thing at a time, what would be the 5 new levers of commissioning that you would want in primary care and GP land from us to shift some of the game? So, genuinely come back with the proposition rather than just another conversation about strategic intent. Let's try and get some... I keep going back to this point about, we just need to try and see, because the world has shifted in a way that we don't really realise, and we need to start thinking about using different mechanisms to change the way we actually get services delivered. Yeah? Are we comfortable with that as an approach? So, okay. Right. I'm at the end. Oh, thank you very much. Closing remarks from review of meeting. Views, thoughts? Come on, let's have a bit of an open conversation. Some of it is heavy going. The focus on acute is a point well made, and we'll try and get back to that. What else? Yeah.
I welcome a theme around screening and immunisations, and obviously we talked about the lung cancer programme before, so there's elements of prevention that we're bombing down. One thing we didn't quite cover was about we need to get planning for immunisations next year, and the support of the provider collab and the trust execs in that space would be really crucial.
I was just going to say that that last conversation is really important, because but one of the things that's where we tend to focus on providers is because we have so much data and information on providers, and we have so little data about, or we don't see it. So maybe one of the things that could be the focus is give us more information and data about what happens in primary care and in our communities, so that then that can help inform what we prioritise, and that what I think was a call to action from the chair to say let's start doing something real.
my first few weeks here, I was struck by, I was being briefed on some of the interactions we were having with GP land around some of the contractual relationships around IT and estates and all that sort of stuff, which appeared to be more of a primary focus than actually thinking about these are a major piece of weaponry. And actually, that's a flip in that is actually one of the core bits of, and again, we need to think about how we're dealing with that internally as well. And genuinely, in that session, we need some real challenge, so try and get some of your feistier colleagues. Adam. Well, not that feisty, just you.
I was going to say be careful what you wish for, but I think that would be welcomed actually, because I think, you know, we've got nearly 2,000 primary care providers across Cheshire and Merseyside, and yeah, Naomi's bang right in terms of the conversation isn't quite there. I think the performance report over the years since the ICB's inception, I've been asking why aren't we measuring and reporting on things in my discipline, you know, or in all of the disciplines of primary care, because it's really, really limited, and we always come back to sentinel metrics and sentinel metrics only. But there is rich data. We hold rich data as an ICB. It just doesn't come to this table. So I think that could be a very good challenge there, to see what we can look at.
So I was struck by the conversation we had over lunch, some of us, which is about how we all talk about how much turns up at the front door of A&E. We all know 30% of it shouldn't be there. And I know at the meeting on Tuesday, you were being asked about what ideas you had. Well, ranging from put shut on the front door, which is probably not possible, but actually start turning people away. So, but to turn people away, you need another magnet. It's not about, you can't just turn them away. You need to push them to somewhere else where they'll get good, if not better service, rather than sitting there for 10 hours. So I think, you know, we again, rather than waiting for from the on high to tell us what to do, we should start thinking about, because every area is different, isn't it? I mean, I know that from a Wirral experience. I mean, and how many, John, you were saying at the moment, you've got 85 people waiting for beds, was it? 85? Yeah. I mean, so this is, you know, so if you took 30% out, et cetera, you know, you're in a far different place. I mean, anyway, I just throw this out because I think it's an area, space we should be getting into, really. Andrea, and it will cost nothing.
Can I have that in writing, please? So something that we've been talking about in the Finance Committee, but it applies to all our committees, I think, and the board, is the change in our role as an ICB going into the next year. So the information that I collect, for example, is around having that oversight of the finances for the system, for the ICS. And that role is shifting, and therefore the way in which I expect to be reporting and the role of the Finance Committee will shift, and therefore of the board. So the way this conversation is moving is into a strategic commissioning place, and therefore the data sets that inform our conversations need to shift as well. So I think it is something that we need to give a lot of thought to, but it's from a timing point of view, it feels the right time as well to be having that debate about our future role and agendas.
And exercising that convening power we have in a way, in a very different way. Without being unfair, I would mark it as rather passive. We need to be a lot more proactive. That would be my view of it. So, okay, any other reflections? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Thank you.